Sawadika! If you're anything like us, you're going to want to obtain a long-term visa to allow you to stay here in paradise. So let us take you through the process and let you know the type of visa that we chose for our long-term stay. Before we begin, please note that visa requirements can change over time, so always double check with the Thai consulate within your own country for the most up-to-date information. Let's start. We decided to engage the services of a visa agent within our own country, and I think that this service was well worth the money. It actually wasn't a very expensive service, and the paperwork that's required can seem quite overwhelming, and a lot of questions come up along the way. I had a look back at the email exchange between myself and the agent at the time that we were applying, and we had 56 emails go back and forth of me bombarding him with questions which he answered without hesitation every time. So I would recommend an agent for a first-time application, but it's a personal choice, and perhaps you're comfortable and you have the time frame to work with that this wouldn't be a requirement for you. Even with an agent, this process still took about 2 months to gather together all the information, to get it down to the Thai consulate, for them to work through it, for them to request anything that they required in addition to what we provided, and for us to finally receive our passports back with the visa. So let's go through the list of documents that you'll need to provide if you apply for a non-immigrant OA. First of all, of course, there's the application. There's also an additional application which is very similar to the first one, but it is required by immigration. You will get a foreign insurance certificate which will be provided by the insurance company that you select to provide the necessary cover. This is the criteria of the non-immigrant OA visa. It is not necessary for a non-immigrant O. You have to have a medical certificate which has been signed by your doctor and provided within the last 3 months, and that is specifically to say that you are free from leprosy, elephantitis, tuberculosis, drug addiction, or third stage syphilis. You will need to have a passport with validity of 18 months. So the normal requirement is validity for 6 months, but as you're applying for a long-term visa for a year, the advice of our visa agent was to have a 18-month validity on your passport. You will need 3 passport photos to accompany your application. You will also need a criminal record certification that has been issued within the last 3 months. You can normally obtain that from your local police. Your most recent resume or CV. This is a document that if you are self-employed, you can provide for yourself. As we decided to go for proof of funds based on a monthly income equivalent to 65,000 baht, we needed to provide 3 months of bank statements which were bank stamped and signed by our bank. So Jamie and I got the non-immigrant O visa that is commonly known as the family visa to accompany Dean on his OA visa. So I was on what's known as a trailing spouse visa, and Jamie was on as a dependent child. So our requirements were slightly different to Dean's. We didn't have to provide as many documents. We didn't have to provide the police record certification. We didn't have a insurance requirement. We did actually choose to get insurance, but it wasn't a requirement of the visa. And we also didn't have to provide a medical certificate. But what we did have to provide was the marriage certificate and the birth certificate, and they had to be certified. For certification of the marriage certificate and the birth certificate within New Zealand, they had to be authenticated by our Department of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So that was a little bit of a process. We had to send them down to our capital city, Wellington, and they had to be properly stamped, waxed, stamped and authenticated by them and then returned. And we had to keep those copies also for travelling to Thailand for the extension of our visa. So probably one of the more complicated parts of the visa application was the requirement for us to show our flight itinerary. So for Dean, he only needed to show a flight into Thailand, but for Jamie and I, we needed to show a flight in and out of Thailand within the 90 days that we were going to be stamped in for initially, even though our intention was to extend for a year. So yeah, that can be a little bit tricky, because obviously you don't really want to have to commit to paying for a flight out of Thailand when you have no intention of leaving Thailand. There are ways around that I won't go into fully in this video, but if you want to contact me on my comments on the video, please feel free to, and I might be able to give you a little bit of more information there. The other thing that they want you to provide is a hotel or accommodation booking for the entire time that you intend to stay. And that's another tricky one, because most people that are going to stay long term in Thailand, probably they'll book some accommodation ahead of time. With us, we booked a month to stay here when we first got here, but we really wanted to be on the ground and able to look around at villas and apartments before we committed to anything long term. So to have to provide a schedule of accommodation for the entire time that you're here, just to get your visa issued, is a little bit tricky. But there's also ways to provide what's needed. So if you've got any questions about that, please ask me in the comments and I'll try and answer those to the best of my ability. In conclusion, for your OA application, you will need proof of funds, either the equivalent of 800,000 baht in positive balance for a minimum of 2 months, or monthly income equivalent of 65,000 baht per month. You will need a criminal record certificate, a medical certificate showing that you are free from specific ailments, insurance certificate showing the required cover for your visa, a flight itinerary, evidence of accommodation, and your most recent CV or resume. For your O application, in addition to flight itinerary and evidence of accommodation, you will need certified bank statements for the prior 6 months showing sufficient funds to support your stay, certified marriage certificate for your spouse, and a certified birth certificate for dependent children. The cost of the OA visa was 300 New Zealand dollars. The cost of the O visa was 120 New Zealand dollars each. This does not include the cost of the visa agent. Okay, so I was just reviewing my video before I released it, and I realized that I had actually forgotten one of the most important details, and that is for the OA visa, you must be 50 years or older. So as it's commonly known as the retirement visa, it has an age criteria, and that is what it is. So 50 plus is the age criteria for the OA visa. Once your visas are issued, you're free to travel to Thailand. So when we arrived, Dean with the OA visa got stamped in for a year from the date of arrival, and that was him. He was all good. He had multiple entry visa, so he could come and go within that year without the need for a re-entry permit. Jamie and I were stamped in for 90 days, and what we had to do is go to immigration in Phuket within 30 days of the end of the 90-day stamp, and then we could extend our visa in line with Dean's. So we took the appropriate paperwork to immigration, which included our authenticated marriage certificate and Jamie's birth certificate. the other documents that are all sort of stock standard when you go to immigration: copy of passport, your PM30 from where you reside, and other documents that are easily accessible. And the cost of the extension is 1,900 baht per visa. And yeah, that was a fairly straightforward process. One thing I will say about that is it's good for you to have as much knowledge about what you're doing when you arrive at immigration, because depending on who you get there, you can get mixed information. And that, in fact, is what happened to us. When we turned up at immigration, we had some students that were helping out that didn't think that we could extend our visas in line with Dean's, and then they had another more senior person come and help them, who also was insisting that we could not extend our visa in line with Dean's. She was saying that we could get a student visa for Jamie being at school, and that I could be her guardian and get a visa that way, but only one of us could go as a trailing spouse or a dependent child with Dean's visa. Now this, in actual fact, was not true, and I was pretty sure of my facts because I had done a lot of research before we went, and we spoke to another senior person at immigration, and they reassured the lady that had given us that information that that was incorrect, and that we both could extend our visas in line with Dean's. So yeah, that would be my advice to you. Be sure of what it is that you are doing and how it's done and the legalities behind it, and then you're all good to go. I just wanted to also bring you in on a handy hint that doesn't seem to be widely known, and that is how you can get a second year out of your 1 year OA visa. It's not dodgy, it's all totally above board, and it is actually how the visa is supposed to work. It just seems that not many people are aware of it. And that is, if you leave the country prior to your valid until date on your visa, you can come back in, and if you have an insurance certificate, you can get another 365 days on your stamp. So the insurance certificate will have to be in line with the 365 days, but that is how you can get that second year out of your 1 year visa. Please be aware that it is the valid until date on the visa and not the stamped in date. Those are two different things, and your valid until date will be in line with the original visa, and your stamped in date is when you actually arrive in the country. So just make sure that you're aware of which date is the correct one. But yeah, that is actually what we plan on doing in September of this year. Dean will leave, come back in with another year's worth of insurance and be stamped in for another year. And that means that there's no need for any further proof of funds. It's all valid from your first visa. So I hope that's helpful to some of you that may not have known that. So I hope this information has been helpful to you, and if it has, it would be really appreciated if you could hit the like button, if you can subscribe, share with your friends, and we really do appreciate you watching every week. It means a lot. In the future weeks, I'll bring to you other types of visas. I thought it was a good place to start with the ones that we had actually applied for, as my knowledge is best on that visa. But I do have quite a lot of information about other options, so in the future weeks we'll bring that information to you. Thanks again for watching. See you next week.